BC, let me take advantage of your versatility. When I look at Nebraska in the transfer portal, and obviously in the NIL era, like you kind of get market values are kind of set. You know what I mean?
Yep.
How how important do you think like fiscal savvy or versus this is just kind of the cost of doing business can impact Nebraska like with position by position. Obviously, tackles are going to be very expensive and quarterbacks are going to be very expensive. Like, how important do you think fiscal savvy will be in the long if Nebraska's playing the long game?
Um, I think pretty. I think that's a pretty big deal. You don't want to just throw away money, and it is difficult though. The question you're asking gets you to a topic that they probably have had to have meetings upon meetings where you think about um, how much are you willing to spend for a player who has done. It's weird that we're talking about this, but this is college football right now, right? So how much are you willing to give to a player who has been inconsistent or maybe hasn't wasn't even the top two or three on his O line or something like that. Like you really have to look at that and be like, how could he develop here? That type of player. Is there someone else who's going to be less heralded, maybe from a school that's not as high profile, but we like the film better? And I think the biggest thing is you have to not be worried about what the initial public reaction is to stuff and just force something to force it, just for that big headline, if you know what I mean. Like, and I'm not trying to say that there's not a specific player they shouldn't get or should get. I just think there is right now a definite anxiousness for Nebraska to land an O lineman, but you just have to be really smart
I
about it
agree.
and not just push it to be like, okay, you got your headline on a Wednesday, you feel good, everybody feels good here in January, but are you going to feel good in August about it? And it sounds like I'm talking real cryptic about, like the Alabama guy who's in, but I'm
Well,
not. I
not
don't.
not not not
I think.
really. I mean, it's better than like guys getting on Twitter or TikTok and saying, "Oh, must get guy," like because
Yeah.
it sets a bad narrative for actually how it works. It's not just like, well, there's a good guy available, do what you got to do. Like I just don't think
Yeah.
Nebraska wants to be in that business. I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the way you said it too. I like that because we are in this time where it's like must get, like all this reaction to certain guys, and sometimes there is that guy. I know the New Mexico State guy is out there. His name too as a potential visitor. Sorry, I was a little disconnected from it yesterday because I was traveling. But there are players like that too who you could look at say I like his upside just as much as this other guy who played in a power conference. Maybe you put them together and you say actually I like the guy who was at Alabama, and but I just think when you make decisions, and I think they're like this, you don't want to be influenced by uh, the public narrative or the way the reaction is going to be to one guy over another guy. It's got to be a steadfast belief. Like we talked to this player on the visit, and we really feel like he fits what we're about. He can grow here, and maybe that is a guy like Elijah Pritchett. Maybe it's the guy like Pete from New Mexico State or someone else who's going to pop in the portal at some point. So um, it's a big deal to land one, I think, but it's got to be the right one. You really got to do the homework the best you can, and not worry about what the headline is going to be, or this one is going to cause more of a tremor than another one. You just can't. That can't be on your radar at all, I think.
BC, it's kind of interesting, the offensive tackle transfer situation, right? Because you've got Pritchett from Alabama, former 5-star, super highly touted. You look at him, he's like, okay, he's got some experience. Maybe you aren't in love with the tape. And then you've got Pete from New Mexico, proven guy at a lower level. It kind of encapsulates Nebraska's strategy in general over this transfer period, right? They've got a handful of guys that are high upside, high talent, but no production yet. And then they've got a bunch of guys that are really high performers at smaller levels Like that seems pretty intentional to have both, right?
I'd agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely. And I mean, Matt Rhule's talked even about the two-pronged approach too in the portal, where it's sort of like the NFL, where there are those like, okay, you're going to have to commit a lot, of money to a certain position or a certain guy, and then there's these other ones where it's a value piece, or you see like the development aspect of it, like Gabe Moore. The defensive lineman might be an example of that, but who's to say? Maybe he comes in and he's a guy they like right away. So that's the fascinating thing about the portal. But I do think it's important to not just get caught up in some of the power conference guys. Like one of my favorite gets they have is Andrew Marshall out of Idaho. From everything I've heard about him, and I like him just because of his versatility. Can also be a return man and all that, but that's a kid who's confident and grew a lot in his game last year. And I had a chance to talk to him, one of the few portal guys. They don't do as many interviews once they're in the portal as they do in their high school recruits, but he believes in himself a lot after what he did at Idaho, and he maybe did that stuff sort of out of the view of most national college football fans, but he did it, and he knows he did it, and he believes he can do it at this level. So when you find determined guys like that, even if they're not on everybody's radar, that makes all the difference.
PC, we only got about 90 seconds left, but we were talking yesterday morning after, NDSU, and, Gronkowski's on the move from SDSU, and Bryce Hawthorne's a guy in the D-line heading to Iowa from SDSU. And, of course, it came up about Marty Brown. I'm a huge Sharmar Brown guy, and not necessarily specific to him, but with all the visits that Nebraska's had on campus, and none of them have been running backs, do you get the sense that Nebraska feels pretty good about that running back room?
I do. I take coaches at their word maybe more than people say I should. Rhule has really expressed that a lot, even when times weren't as great for the running backs, when we were, people were kind of complaining about this and that before Emmett Johnson kind of went on the tear at the end. He would always say, I like this room. He's always been sort of a fan of Quentin Ives and some of those guys who aren't as high profile too. So, I do think that they like that position, and, maybe they're willing to see what the spring looks like, and, just see where it takes it. But obviously having Emmett back makes you feel a lot better about it. But I think there's guys 2, 3, and Jamarian Parker and Booth, they like them a lot too. So, maybe one of those guys adds to the equation. So that's not the position that's the biggest worry to me. I don't think it is them either. So we'll see what they do with it.
That's Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. BC, appreciate the time. As always, we'll talk to you next week.
Yep, thanks, guys.